Chair, we are live.
And let's call to order the Police Accountability Regular Meeting for Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. Public notice: to access this meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using this URL listed below. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 826-5339-6072. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press star 9 and wait to be recognized. Land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of the Fijian, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Florida Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great performance to all the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shellmount, and the Ohlone people continue to reside in East Bay. Recognize that Berkeley residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. Which brings us to agenda item number 1, roll call.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Just want to give a gentle reminder for the folks using the microphones. If your orange is not going to capture your voice, and just press it down for it to be green. Just want to make also a quick announcement before we do the roll call. We have Board Member Moses that's currently on standby remotely. He has a petition to receive approval for remote participation under emergency circumstances. So right now we're recognizing that he's here, but we are requesting that you modify the agenda to consider the vote for approval, and then we can recognize him as being present.
That sounds good to me. Can we get a motion for that, please? Second?
Okay. Okay, and I do have to proceed through a roll call vote based on the Brown Act. So I'll go with Board Member Calavita. Board Member Leftwich.
Yes.
Board Member Blackaby.
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano.
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson.
Yeah.
And Chair Moore. Okay, with that said, the motion carries to add the consideration of remote participation to the agenda. I'll now proceed to roll call vote again for the purposes of this initial roll call vote. Board Member Moses is technically considered absent, and we'll amend the record as we move forward. So with that said, this meeting was called to order at 6:32 p.m. I'll now proceed with roll call. Chair Moore.
Present.
Vice Chair Wilson. Board Member Calavita. Board Member Leftwich.
Here.
Board Member Blackaby.
Here.
Board Member Cayetano. Okay, and again, I will be amending the record for Board Member Moses, who is currently waiting in the webinar. I'd like to recognize the staff that's present here tonight. On behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Aguilar, Investigator Horton, Investigator Wechter, and myself, Jose Murillo. On behalf of the BPD, we have Chief Lewis and Lieutenant Montgomery joining us here tonight. On behalf of the City Attorney's Office, we have Deputy City Attorney Iris Mattis. And on behalf of the city managers, we have Dr. Arredondo joining us here tonight. And Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Jose. I will take us to agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda. I'm not seeing here. Concerns, get a motion.
Second.
Okay. And we do have to do, again, a roll call vote, given the remote participation. So I'll go, again, Board Member, and these are alphabetical order, Board Member Blackaby.
Here.
Board Member Cal.
Sorry, yes.
Board Member Calavita, Board Member Cayetano, Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson, and Chair Moore.
Yes.
Okay. And Chair, we're ready to go on to the item to allow Board Member Moses to participate remotely.
Do I have to make a motion or can we just go ahead and? Okay, so I'm gonna ask for a motion to have board member Moses participate remotely.
So moved. Second.
Okay, I'll proceed with the roll call vote. Board Member Blackaby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson, Chair Moore.
Yes.
Motion carries. And the record's amended to reflect that Board Member Moses is present.
Thank you all for the accommodation.
Sorry, board member Moses, your mute was on.
I said thank you all for the accommodation. Can you hear me? It's okay. Saying thank you all for the accommodation. If you can hear me.
that one more time? For the vote?
I'm saying thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can read his lips. Up and down votes will work too, if worse comes to worse.
I can-
That being said.
I can hear you. I think they can't hear us.
Oh, interesting. Okay, here I'll
Maybe you should let them know because I can hear you and I assume they won't be able to hear Chief Lewis either if they can't hear you.
Just as a reminder.
Okay, thank you for that heads up to whomever was just speaking. I'll
If there are many speakers.
send a
They
note to
comment
them right
on
now.
any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time. Please note.
And hey, Iris, and I'm
confidential
also able to hear
personnel
you.
matters, shouldn't be addressed during public comment. With that said, I'll now proceed to those attending physically, before moving on to those joining us virtually. With that said, is there any public comment from those physically present? Okay, one moment while I get the timer on the screen. Okay, the timer is live.
Thank you. My name is Kit Sagnor, and I'm very happy to be able to come in person and for the beginning of this meeting, although I will have to leave, I think, before it's over. I just want to let you know that I, and I think many other members of the public, will be looking to see if we can find out the results. A few meetings ago, this group voted to initiate a subpoena. I was among those in 2020 who thought it was very important that the board have the ability to issue subpoenas and when needed. I was at the meeting at which the director of police accountability made a report to city council, and I believe I heard somebody on council saying, oh, it's too bad that the board doesn't have subpoena power. So I don't know sort of what the status of that is. But I'm hoping that at some point there will be some public information that will help to clarify that. And as I said, I think it is important that the board be able to do that when needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Moses, do you mind just speaking to test on?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Perfect. Thank you very
Can-
much.
Okay, great.
Is there any other physically present speaker that'd like to provide public comment? Okay, with that being said, I'll now move on to our virtual attendees. Chair, at this time, we don't have any raised hands or additional members of the public joining.
Thank you, Jose. That'll take us to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. Minutes for the regular meeting of May 8th. Board member Leftwich.
Yes, I just had a comment regarding, I think it was, item 9C, that was, sorry, on page 14 of the packet, the discussion and action regarding the potential change of the regular meeting location. And I'm listed as, seconding that motion, and I don't have a specific recollection, but I don't think that was me since I was the only one that opposed that motion.
We'll review the record and then.
Thank you, board member Leftwich. I'm sure you are correct in that. Are there any other, changes that need to be made? Then I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve the, minutes with the, correction on page 14.
So moved. Second?
Okay, do you have to again proceed to roll call vote? Board Member Blackaby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich.
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Moore.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 5, ODPA staff report. Director?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, board members, fellow staff members, members of the public. We do have a few staff updates. I, prior to the meeting, I received the inquiry about the city manager's, status. I don't have any direct knowledge. We do have 2 representatives. I don't want to put them on the spot, but if there's any information that they have about that process and or any general updates that they want to provide, then please, I'll yield my time and then come back to my staff updates.
Rex Brown, Diversity Equity Inclusion Officer for the City of Berkeley. There is no public information at this time as to the name of individuals. I believe that's a matter for a closed session for City Council. So perhaps there will be more information at the next meeting. And over to you, Carrie.
Thank you, Rex.
Oh, nice.
I just wanted to take this moment to congratulate Director Aguilar, ODPA staff, and the board for a successful meeting presentation last week of the triennial report. Our staff also had the opportunity at the regular city council meeting to provide a spring 2024 status update on reimagining public safety. We kind of shared a status update at a very high level, but in the report, it's more comprehensive. We offer budgetary recommendations, and as you are all aware, we're kind of going through that biennial budget process at the moment, and just really look forward to continue our partnership and keeping the public and community involved and updated on all of our efforts to reimagine public safety. That's all I have on my end. Just thank you so much again for our partnership.
Thank you. And, Mr. Chair, board members, we have a few staffing updates. Our admin that, we've been out of for almost a year now, does have a start date now, June 10th. We're gonna provide a full bio, but she is a member of the city already. She's coming from the city manager's office, very well versed in, the internal city procedures and processes. Something that we're missing from our relatively new staff to the city. So she's bringing a lot of institutional knowledge that we currently don't have. So we'll provide the full bio at the next meeting. Tentative offers have been made to our data analyst and our summer intern. In the summer internship program, it's being done through a collaboration with the mayor's office. They have a partnership with Cal. And we're able to include us in that, and we have a student that's very eager to support the work that we're doing. She was also interned with D7 and did some data work while she was there. They're both gonna undergo our background process. It is very involved. There's different tiers for a summer intern. It'll be different than the full staff. But we do this to ensure that we're treating our process with integrity and making sure that the confidentiality won't be breached. And we have also offered, and he has become a permanent member of the team. And if I haven't mentioned it yet, Mr. Murillo, he was originally with the Apple One contract when he started with the city, but now he's a full member of the team, a permanent member of the team rather. And we'll include his bio as well in the next meeting agenda. As my colleague mentioned, we did the report presentation to council. I'd say that it was well received. They expressed a lot of gratitude for the hard work that the board members and the staff have been doing. They requested some clarifications on some items, and we're going to be following up with them. They did also made some suggestions on future reports, so we're gonna incorporate that feedback with the board's feedback to make sure that we have a report that reflects the desires of both bodies. We will also be providing a summary, a report of that meeting. The recording is available if you missed that presentation. We also did go before the Budget and Finance Committee a few weeks ago and made the presentation. Again, it appeared to be positively received without making any commitments to us at this time, but it seemed that the committee was very appreciative of the work. Again, they did recognize the importance of funding at our preliminary stage. That's a new iteration of oversight in the city. And I did receive a request from Vice Chair regarding the pending policy reports that we have that's under our wheelhouse right now. So we'll be providing an update at the next meeting. And the NACO registration is now open. Last time it got sold out. So if you're interested in attending, please let me know as soon as possible. We want to make sure that we support as many board members that want to attend. This year's theme is 30 years of NACO, progress, preservation, perseverance. And Jason and I, investigator Jason Wechter and I will be leading a panel on the importance of board member training. And now I'd like to open it up to any board members, even questions or concerns.
Well done. Questions or concerns? That's the really number. One more time, I'm gonna ask anybody before we move on. Do you have any questions for the director or staff? This is amazing day. That being said, that brings us to agenda item number 6, which is chair and board members' reports. And I do not have anything to report at this time, but I'd like to open it up to my fellow board members. If there's anything you care to report, please.
Just had a quick question. At the retreat that we had, we mentioned that we might be planning for some sort of information session, community event, outreach event after the issuance of the annual report. And I'm curious if we had an update on that or if there's someone that was working on that. Because if not, then I'm happy to step in and fill a gap. But if there is, then I'm interested in where we're at with that.
That's a great question. I don't know if we have a Juneteenth, if we're ready for Juneteenth. It is the 16th of June. Do we have a presence there this year, Director?
Yes, we have procured a table. They haven't assigned the location yet, but we can provide an update and just a reminder on that. Last year and the year prior, there was a table in advance. We have a tent. For board members, we have some swag to give away. Now we have our annual report too, so we'll have some copies of that. Regarding the taking the report on the tour, I have reached out to some community organizations and there is some initial interest. We're just trying to coordinate, but if you want to also join in the outreach, absolutely, we'll welcome that. So right now we reached out to Healthy Black Families and also reached out to the Hope Center. And they have a preliminary invitation for the PAB. They haven't solidified it yet, but potentially in June to report at their monthly meeting. If not then we could potentially look at a different date.
And are we just going to discuss the annual report or are we also going to discuss the fair and impartial policing report?
So when I did the outreach at the time, we did for the annual report, but I'm sure that they'll be happy to learn more about that also because we make a mention to the FIP report in the annual report.
I feel like we should, I was going to ask the same question. I feel like maybe we should make a dual purpose outreach.
I think we actually discussed that at one point, the dual focus of these community meetings or outreach. If we don't get maybe sufficient uptake from different CEOs, what about us just hosting a community meeting with some food? That's something we could do.
We could definitely support that.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Is there any other board members that like to take the floor? Now is the time. Not seeing or hearing any, we're going to move forward. Oh,
Chair, I'm just, with regard to Juneteenth, are we going to it seems like, that's fast approaching. I feel like we need to take volunteers and so forth. Are we gonna do that tonight? Oh, usually we have volunteers, board members staff the table.
We can circulate a sign-up sheet. That's not Brown active, so that's not something, you can do right now if you want to
No,
volunteer.
no, I'm just saying.
I would hope that, I'll just make a quick, advertisement and say that it's a great way for us to interact with the community. I try and be out there every year that I've served on this board. And I think, one, it's a great, event for the city of Berkeley. There was, box and box of people. Everybody had a great time and we got a lot of exposure. I'd like to keep the momentum going. That being said, that brings us to agenda item number 7, Chief of Police report. Hey,
Good
Chief,
evening. I'm good. How are you? Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
floor is yours.
Okay, great. So I wanted to start off with a report on our staffing. And so one of the things I wanted to share, I know I usually run through the numbers for you, but one of the things I was excited to share this week is in the course of the last 2 weeks, we had a couple things happen. One, we had an officer graduate from an academy, and I made 2 conditional offers for new officers. What's important about that is the fact that every one of these are Bay Area natives. They each support our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals for our department. It includes a former BHS student. It includes a UC Berkeley grad. And each of them specifically in the interview processes with me identified that they were coming to not only law enforcement, but to the city specifically because of their goals and desire to work and serve the city. So that for me, that was a big win. I wanted to share that with the board. Another thing I wanted to talk about that's on my plate right now is this week I'm interviewing for the principal program manager position. So that's the lead that's going to be in charge of our new Office of Strategic Planning and Accountability. So I'm excited about that office. I think the board will benefit greatly from it. One of the projects that individual will be working on and leading is the EIS implementation project. That office is designed and expected to increase our ability to provide detailed information to start to drive in greater ways the way we look at our data, analyze our data, and use it to both achieve our organizational goals and also make sure that our standards are reflected in the policies that we have and in the way we deploy our resources. So it's a strategic planning for both resource allocations, but also policy development. So I wanted to also make a brief comment on the PAB's memo to me regarding the departmental budget recommendations. I am working on a formal response for the board, but I did want to comment on 2 of the recommendations that are in there. The first recommendation was in regards to the department having a strategic plan, operational metrics, and service level goals. I absolutely agree that it's very important to have a comprehensive plan. And that's going to be one of the focus points of the Office of Strategic Planning and Accountability. I do want to share that our operational metrics and our service goals do currently drive our staffing decisions and our allocation. In fact, that's what led us to adjust our beat staffing model recently to accommodate the staffing shortages that we were experiencing. So I understand from the comments from the board that they're looking for more clarity around that, more transparency around that. And I look forward to bringing that into the next rounds of this process. Secondly, the PAB recommended that the department present on our baseline budget and give more information about how our budget was directed by our key priorities. I will share that we work on a template process. So city manager's budget office asks us to produce certain information and we follow those requirements for how we report on the budget. That certainly doesn't mean that we can't start to dive into that conversation and work with the PAB to take a look at some of those baseline pieces and how we land on the baseline pieces of our budget. And again, the way that our budget is currently allotted, the way that we're funded is via division. And so it's a little challenging sometimes to break apart our budget and talk about how the key priorities that we worked on were funded through that. Because, for example, our training budget is not just one pool of training money. Each of our divisions have training budgets attached, but we may have a departmental wide training on implicit bias or fair and impartial policing. And so we just have to explore the ways we can share the way we're spending our money and spending our training budget and funds in a way that can better illustrate how our resource allocation is in fact guided by our strategic priorities and objectives. And then finally, I did want to give a little brief update on our EIS process that we're working on. I wanted to thank the board for their support around us moving to implementation of a platform. And so we're waiting, we put that as part of our budget. That was one of our top priority funding pieces in our budget. Where it's sitting now is waiting to see how council lands on whether or not that's funded. As soon as we have funding secured, we can start to move into an RFP process to go out to bids to see what vendors are out there that we might want to explore. I would anticipate that the same way that we invited the PAB to have a representative in that RFP process for the consultant, I would hope that if it's not Board Member Cayetano, that it's somebody else on the board would be interested in supporting us and giving input as we went through that RFP process. Finally, one more thing about EIS audits. I do want to report that we just wrapped up our most recent quarterly audit. We're now looking at recommendations internally and pulling that documentation together, and that will be shared with the board, hopefully in the next week or two. And I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all have tonight.
Open it up.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Chief. Can you hear me?
I can, go ahead.
Yeah, I was with regard to the EIS audits. This last round that you did, were they also a random selection of officers and employees, or was it targeted in some way?
So we had hoped to be a little farther along with getting a platform or the consultant work done. Clearly, like I just explained, we're not. So we didn't change the way we've selected officers to be audited yet. But we have expanded some of the things we're looking at. I think you'll see a little bit of a different report this time around. And so we can continue to talk, and I'll be continuing to consider, especially if it's going to be a protracted implementation process for the EIS to transition. I'm not necessarily opposed to changing from our current method of selection of auditing. I just don't know that we're exactly there yet. But I know that every single time we've done one of these audits, we've tried to improve it. And I've heard very loud and clear that you're looking for us to look at different ways to identify officers to evaluate.
Thank you.
Member Cayetano.
Hi, Chief. Good to see you. I just want to say thank you to the department for partnering with the board and working on the early intervention system. And I appreciated y'all's engagement with us on that. And I look forward to also in the future, working with both the department and the union on figuring out how to integrate early intervention system into the department to better serve the city. So thank you for that. I was curious if you saw, and I had a second unrelated thing. I was curious if you saw the note, it came in last night about the DUI checkpoint that's happening tomorrow. And there was some concern about the placement of it and why that specific Ashby location was chosen. So I was curious if you had any information on why locations in general are chosen for DUI checkpoints, and if you could speak to the specific one.
Yeah, of course. So a lot of our DUI checkpoints happen because of OTS grant funding. Sometimes those have parameters or rules around where we hold checkpoints. Like, for example, they might need to be on a highway, a state highway for some reason. I don't know that that's particularly the case here. The other thing that we're looking at when we're setting up checkpoints, are they in a location that you're going to have a lot of traffic in, right? Or a lot of vehicular traffic coming through. If you don't, it's less fiscally responsible to have a checkpoint at some obscure location that you might not get that many vehicles through. We also look at collision data, DUI arrest data, so we basically use data. We look at our transparency hub and identify where locations may be that either need extra enforcement, extra attention. As you know, Ashby Avenue is one of our primary high collision thoroughfares. So we try to give that area as much attention as we can with, appropriately.
A quick follow-up. So the Ashby would be reflected in the transparency hub as a high collision data site and thoroughfare, as you mentioned, right? Like community members who are interested could look at the transparency hub to see that.
Yeah, so you can actually look at our annual report. We reported on what the top 10 intersections were this year. There were San Pablo locations and Ashby locations. Ashby and Seventh have traditionally been challenging locations. I will caveat that a little bit is that there's a layout that's required for a DUI checkpoint to happen, right? So they need a certain number of cone space that they can have. They need to be able to choke down the roadway. They need to have the DUI trailer that does the checkpoint all be able to be outfitted. So there may be physical constraints around the exact intersection that affect on where we can have a checkpoint actually situated to make sure it's as safe as possible. So typically they'll try to look at where they're going to get traffic. They think they have an issue with collisions, serious violent collisions, and issues around DUIs specifically, and use those areas to have checkpoints.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Chief, again, thanks again for engaging with us on the budget conversation and for your feedback. And we look forward to continuing to work with you. I have just a couple of quick things. One, totally agree with you on the structure of the budget. And I think some of our commentary was as much on the way the city does budgeting as it is the BPD's particular process. So we just wanted to, I think, again, acknowledge that, so we understand that you've got a particular template. We were trying to get kind of a little bit, past that as well. And then the second piece on the metrics, which I think is super important, in tracking to the metrics. Again, I think we're interested in the metrics, but also the goal setting for the metrics, right? Like, which is like, it's one thing about to have the data on the clearance rates or the data on, time for response by dispatch or time for response or the amount of time the officer spends on a call. But equally important is like, what do we want it to be, or what do you want it to be, or what does the community want it to be, and setting those expectations. So just that certainly feels like a great kind of collaborative process over time. Again, not to overburden it, but like coming up with what we want to track and then having some sort of community expectations of what we think good is, what you're trying to aim for to make sure you have enough budget to do that. So again, I just appreciate the dialogue and just a little more in terms of where we were coming from in terms of what you saw and your response. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if I could just talk on that just very briefly for the board. And I know when we had our smaller conversation around it, you were pressing me a little bit to land on a number, a time limit. How, what's a good response time? What's a good time on call? And, it's a challenging conversation because an officer being on a call for a long time could mean that resource is not available to be deployed elsewhere, right? It also could mean that they are employing extra investigative techniques that have increased the likelihood of a closure, right? They're going and knocking on neighbors' doors. They're looking for video. They're spending time giving victim compensation information to the victim, right? Or helping them process through what happened, or helping them feel more safe and secure in their home after they've been traumatized in their home. So it's like, guiding that. If you look at response times as a whole, like I want to know how fast you get to priority 1 to 4 total, and you need to be there by X. Or do we really just want to drive down how fast you can get to priority 1 and priority 2 calls, in progress, serious calls. And we allow the other calls to take a little bit longer. Okay, well, if they take too long, then customer service goes down, right? And so it all matters. It's the deciding what the important end of the spectrum is to give the community the service they need when an officer's there, but also the service they need that an officer's going to come in time.
Questions for the chief? Not seeing or hearing any. Thank you very much for your time, chief.
All right, have a good evening.
That takes us to agenda item number 8, subcommittee reports.
Okay, so as always, I'll just go down the list, and if the subcommittee would like to provide an update to the board, we'll proceed by doing so. I'll go ahead and start with the regulation subcommittee.
Well, nothing to report, except that I am frustrated with the, how slow this process is, because board member Ledwidge and I have been designated the representatives to be on the team, to do the meet and confer. And we have, how long? I'm not sure how long it's been. Feels like 2 months. I don't know how long it's been, but there's not been a single word. And I want to just read one sentence out of the triennial report, which I thought was really interesting in this context. The protracted process of adopting final regulations has signified a systemic sluggishness that impedes the efficiency of the oversight function. And I just want to underline that. We're still waiting.
Thank you. Fair and impartial policing.
Well, that report was finished and forwarded to council, and we're going to discuss tonight, I guess, options for whether anything further will be done in front of council with that.
Okay. Surveillance technology policy. Okay, no update at this time. Policies and practices relating to the downtown task force and bike unit allegation.
As I said at our last meeting, that report is almost ready to go. There's just a few more gaps to be filled in by the staff, and that possibly will be concluded by the end of the weekend. So hopefully we'll present something on June 4th.
Okay. Body worn camera policy. No updates at this time. Conflict of interest subcommittee. No updates. The policy review committee.
Yeah, I can provide a quick update. We've been meeting almost weekly, hard at work. We're anticipating or planning for tomorrow afternoon to be our last meeting. Deputy Chief Tate is the contact with the department. And so after our meeting tomorrow, the goal will be for me to pass along the draft that we have, along with some questions that we have of the department. And hopefully have her participation in our next meeting so we can get a much needed feedback from the department.
Thank you.
Can you specify a draft of what?
So this was originally the Lexipol committee. Now the policy committee, we've been working on the vehicle pursuits policy. There was the Lexipol. It was one of the few remaining policies that had not been converted from a general order to Lexipol. And so we've been working off of the Lexipol policy, which is just the Lexipol template. So the department hadn't done any work on it, although now I've heard that perhaps they have been working in a parallel path with us on it. And so we were just working off the template, which differed significantly from the general order. So the draft would be of a revised Lexipol policy.
Okay. And can you remind me of what our plan is for the review of the use of force? That's the policy we're supposed to review every year, right?
Yeah, no current plan, but you're right, we do need to have that, you know, in our sites, but we have no current plan.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just a reminder on that point, at the retreat, the board members did authorize us to take a first stab at it. So that's, one thing that we have, in the plans, and one of the things that, we selected the intern form based on her, prior work to be able to do and assist with some of the coordination for that and set up the community meetings where we'll talk about use of force policies, then present a report to you to convene with the department.
Thank you, Director.
Okay, and then we have the budget and metrics committee.
We're at a good point, although now that we're through with the budget, we may want to convene to think about our PAB metrics, which is kind of the next part of it. So yeah, it's a good reminder.
Thank you. Outreach and engagement.
I'm saying June 16th. I would love to see you all at Juneteenth, South Berkeley, District 3. I'd love to have you all there. And what else was I gonna say? We will provide some kind of sign-up sheet and a way for us to at least try and have one board member during the time be available out on site. You know, the staff does great work. They're there all day. They set up, they take care of everything. And I would love for, you know, an hour or two commitment from as many of you that can.
And it's June 16th ahead of June 19th, right? And one other amendment I'd say is, per our discussion earlier, maybe we should schedule a session with the director to talk about triennial report and FIP outreach and other things we might want to do.
I think that's a great idea. And speaking of community outreach, maybe we'll build some events around those
Yeah.
projects.
Okay, so we can take that. Okay.
Sound good?
Thank you. Off-duty conduct subcommittee? No update at this time. Operations and processes.
Yeah, I'll do a little update if you don't mind, Leah. I had a good conversation with Director Aguilar last week around our document system. And the long and short of it is, I think we had high hopes and aspirations for a SharePoint solution to be something that we look at for our document management system. And in reviewing that process, I think it's going to be an overly burdensome lift for this board to get to that point. But I do think that we can consider an alternative to all of our documentation and instead recognize that the closed session and secure documentation will continue to have to go through the various processes that folks have individually chosen, whether that's paper form, whether that's visiting the office directly or through a secure email. But a lot of our material doesn't fall into that same category, and that is things like our subcommittee meeting documents, our ODPA files and training materials, the meeting minutes and agenda, as well as I think a lot of the subcommittee documentation like the FIP report, the annual report, the triennial report, etc., where I think we've struggled a lot with spending a lot of time in these meetings on the periods and the commas and the friendly amendment stuff that I think there's opportunity to clean up. So we're starting to investigate that a little bit more to see if we can actually use a shared Google Drive as a simpler solution for those non-secure documents. And I wanted to kind of get a sense from the board if there is in fact interest in an approach like that, where again, we would set up sort of a clear folder structure and clear process around how we comment. There's some clarifications around what needs to happen from a Brown Act perspective to make sure that we are in compliance. But the long and short of it being, if there was a PAB ODPA Google Drive that was managed by the team and allowed us to have a single document, for example, the annual reports or the FIP reports that we could add comments to ahead of time. It could be a single document that we could share for those friendly amendment elements. Is that something that folks would be interested in doing? And again, that doesn't necessarily change how we handle the desire for some members of the board to have paper documentation and notes, but rather to have some of those working documents a little more collaborative. Any concerns with that?
I think Member Moses would like to engage our interest, so I'm going to ask the board your thoughts. Member Language.
I would just say, I think the Brown Act is a significant obstacle to that concept.
Yeah,
I do think
Yeah.
we're able to do this.
I don't see how we can have something like a Dropbox that's not open to the public where we're communicating with each other. I mean, I think in theory, it's a good idea, but I don't know if it's workable.
So, and I definitely recognize that concern. Some conversations that I had with Director Aguilar are actually that we might be able to restrict our ability to interact with one another in the documents through restrictions on the comment and specifically the replies to be in compliance with the Brown Act. So, so it sounds like if putting aside the Brown Act concerns, there would be interest in if we can overcome the Brown Act concerns, folks would be on board. Is that true? So it's worth the effort to investigate if there's a way to do this Brown Act compliant, it sounds like.
What?
Well, yes, I appreciate your taking the time to explore this, and I'm all for anything that makes our process more efficient and less kind of reliant on email and printed paper. So if we can figure it out, I'd say we should go for it.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? Okay, Then with that, I'm gonna go ahead and take us to new business. All right, we're good to go, right?
Yeah.
All right, that's agenda item number 9, and A is discussion and action on the board's authority under section 125(4)B of the Berkeley City Charter to propose an operational budget in the city council. Member Wilson.
All right. So I prepared this memo. Hopefully folks have had a chance to review it, and I'm not gonna repeat myself other than to say that as indicated, subsequent to our discussions about the budget that were presented by the director, I learned about this provision that does seem to give us the authority to independently articulate a budget request. And so I am asking the board to approve a recommendation that we ask for an additional analyst, the specific classification TBD, because I want it to be a high enough level position that we can ensure really quality writing skills as well as data analysis skills. And so just as outlined in the memo from my limited tenure here on the board, and I've shared some of this frustration with some of you, I'm experiencing this as a very heavily active working board. And I think there are some challenges in terms of viability, but also the consistency of the work product and the approach. And so thinking about institutionalizing our processes and our work product, I do think we benefit from having a staff position dedicated to, one, helping ensure that we fulfill our mandated obligations on time, but then also to carry out the work of our subcommittees as indicated in the report, and then to facilitate our monitoring of various city council directives, including like most recently came up about this SCU and like how it would be really helpful for us to understand what was happening with the SCU. I think about the ALPR issue that we were very engaged in earlier on. So there's any number of issues that I think we would benefit from additional staff support in monitoring. And I just want to be clear that this staff person would of course report up to the director and his management authority. And I would assume and expect that the director would have flexibility to ensure this person had a full-time workload. So if at any time there wasn't sufficient PAB focused work to do, the director could assign other responsibilities. So I think I'll pause there. It's pretty self-explanatory. People have questions, and I have discussed this as well with the director.
Remember that much.
Yeah, so I had a question. I agree with the concept. I was wondering, is this memo or part of it something that would go to council?
Well, I have no idea. So,
I mean,
I don't know that there's an established process. There is this charter provision. So I'm assuming that we would need to turn this into something that looks like the templated process, even that the chief was referring to, so that it aligned with the city budget process. I need to work with the director to settle on a specific classification being requested. So I just don't know what the process is, but obviously we need to conform with any process that exists.
And the reason that I'm asking is, so on the second page, I guess, of the memo, the first full paragraph, you use the term volunteers a few times. And I think maybe it was board member Cayetano raised it because it came up in another document, I think. And I guess I feel like use of that term kind of minimizes the dedication and hard work of the board. Because I feel like the work product that the individuals on this board put out is absolutely excellent. And I agree that we all work too hard. It'd be great to have somebody help with it. But, and I know you said that the job description obviously have to be someone who's a good writer. But also somebody, I mean, it would all be up to the job description and the background requirements. Because I think that would be a very difficult task. It would be very hard to hire somebody and say, okay, can you please go write this report on whatever policy? So that's my concern with that, but also, again, I'm just a little wrinkled by use of the term volunteer. So I'd rather unpaid board member, instead of volunteer would probably make me feel a little better.
Yeah, I don't need anything to start. It's so interesting to me, the reaction to that. I think it's inappropriate, probably my view, for the city to generally rely on people like us, whatever you want to call us, to do like such heavy lifting of analysis and oversight without sufficient staff support. I just, regardless of the committee or the board, it doesn't, I don't think it lends itself to good governance and again, consistency in the way that your organization is run. So I don't mean anything disparaging by it. And of course, happy to change the language. And again, I don't know what the format is of what would be submitted to the city anyway.
Board Member Lackady.
My question, and I think it's a fantastic idea with the directors. I assume there's no capacity in your existing structure for it. Like, we need this because what you're already anticipating with your analysts and the other positions you have allocated is completely committed to other work, and this needs to be there. Is that fair?
So I would say that it's difficult for me to assess. I'd like to think that once we get to greener pastures where we have full staff, that some of this, we could balance out a little bit more, and where we have seen pain points throughout the year and turning things around from the staff perspective, they will level out. But I do believe, and I spoke to the vice chair about this, that there is certainly plenty of work that's within the wheelhouse of the board, that something like this should be welcome. But I think that, and I don't know, I wasn't here for those discussions, but the policy analysts and the data analysts were contemplated to be the support for the board. So the one thing that we have struggled throughout this period that I've been here is because we haven't had a fully staffed office, and because our resources have been diverted mostly to investigations. So with having somebody that's fully dedicated to you, that doesn't have to worry about the investigation side of it, I think that would be a benefit to you.
Because, what might be interesting is just in your, in the org chart, but just to see, for you to kind of go through the process of thinking where everything belongs and just rationalize everything. Like, you're gonna have plenty of work for these other two positions, excluding anything that the board does, and then the budget analysis that, the vice chair and I did, or, some of these other pieces, or heavier lifting on FIP, some of those pieces would belong in this person. Just, it'd be interesting just to rationalize that, so we can, and the council may want to see that anyway, that like, if we're asking for a whole nother person, how you're gonna allocate all that. And again, I know you've thought about this, but, yes, I'm absolutely supportive of this. It's just making sure that you can justify it relative to the capacity you already have and why we need this one extra body.
If I may add, I think one of the things, and I reviewed a little bit more closely, it is asking for different competencies that may not neatly fit within one of the classifications, and that's one of the things when I arrived at the city, utilizing the city's current classification system doesn't always translate well to our work. So we have catch-all classifications that in theory we can dedicate, but we have a very niche field and does require very specific competencies. There is a process where you can create new classifications for the city structure. Just was giving you a heads up, that process, early on I was discouraged because it could take up to 6 months to a year. So I utilized the existing classifications. Sometimes there's kind of conflict in trying to neatly fit in it within our work.
Go ahead, board.
So I think I support this in concept as well. I'm wondering though, since this position would be housed in the EPA and supervised by them, how do we somehow frame this as a different request? Number one, and number two, what is the timeline, the budget?
Right.
Our budget request has gone in for this, right?
Yeah.
So this would be for the following year? What?
2 years, correct? It'd be a 2-year.
It's a 2-year, but to that question, the council hasn't, it hasn't been hit the council desk yet. It's at the budget and finance, so, but it has been a month-long process So we're a little bit outside of that, not to say that they wouldn't entertain, but they're also getting a lot of different referrals from different council members. And right now, I think the figure that I heard is 30 million shortfall that they're trying to balance. So, just putting that information out there for what it's worth.
So, as Board Member Wilson stated here, there is a provision in the charter amendment that allows the PAB to request its own budget, right? So if and when we were to proceed on this, we could add this to the director's request as the request coming from the PAB.
Yeah, we can hold off, or I think what I would advocate for is just to have the director submitted as an addendum that comes from us, you know, like a memo from us. Really, not because I necessarily think it's gonna get funded this cycle, but we're testing the waters and also just creating that experience of going through the process of seeking the support. So
Yeah.
I think it would have to go through that way.
Good.
Board Member Wilson, Vice Chair Wilson, excuse me, is there, I know there's some action that you'd like to take, would you like to put it out there on the floor?
So I think that the motion that I've kind of teed up in the memo is that we would ask the director to transmit a request to the city council to add one FTE PAB focused analyst to the ODPA budget. I'm happy to make that motion.
Is there a second? You did. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Excellent.
So on the motion to ask the Director of Police Accountability to transmit to council a request for one additional PEP focus FTE.
And that's in this budget window, right? Just to be clear, like that's a very short term to try and make it into this window.
Yeah.
Just for clarity. Okay.
Okay, with that said, I'll now proceed to the roll call vote. Board Member Blackley,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Lutwidge,
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson, and Chair Moore.
Yes,
The motion carries.
that brings us to 9B, discussion and action on the proposal to systematize board training is authorized by section 12512 of the Berkeley City Charter for the ODPA.
Mr. Chair, before we go to that, just clarification on the logistics. How would you like me to transmit this?
I was just gonna send you an email because I'd love to connect. I know Monday, our normal meeting day, is a holiday. I think there's a lot of echoing right now. So that we could look at the classifications, maybe together, to decide. But I think you would submit it as I'd look to your guidance, a memo, addendum, something like that. Okay.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you for that clarification. So the next, item is, Board Member Moses touched on this, we had a discussion, or mentioned that we had a discussion earlier this week, but, or it might have been last week, but, this also came up in the presentation of the annual report. There was an inquiry from one of the council members, regarding the status of training. I know, Board Member Lethwich has been very vocal about ensuring that we're up to date with our training. And the proposal here was born out of that conversation with Board Member Moses to kind of just systematize it. I know board members are on their own doing reviews of the materials, the videos, but this is kind of just trying to establish a baseline or get a commitment, and it would require a combination of synchronous, asynchronous training and some training within the board meeting. So we can provide again the training materials that collectively you'll be reviewing 2 hours on your own. That'll equal out to 24 hours per month if we do it 2 hours per month. And then the synchronous training will be, during the PAB meetings, we could select one, I suggested 11 of the, meetings, we do 1.5 hours of training or whatever we want to land on. That'll be 16.5, and that'll get us to our, 40 hours. The charter does require 40 hours within 6 months of appointment. My observations, it has been very ambitious, considering the work that you're doing outside of this. So I wanted to just put it out there to see if this is something that we can agree upon or if there's an alternative, but we are on public notice about the need and importance for training and getting the hours in.
I thought this was a great suggestion and I fully support it. I don't have much more to add other than that, other than to say that when I was on board, I felt like I was entering, you know, a veil, a haze, and that training would have definitely helped me, and continued training, I think, would serve some of the functions of the legislative reports that the board members have been asking for, because, you know, there's background knowledge that we need to spend. And, you know, as some board members have mentioned, that there's a lot of turnover with the board. So that's also helpful. So.
One clarifying question, do like the ride-alongs we do, is that included in the training? Is that separate from the training? It's training.
Yeah, those are training hours.
Okay.
So maybe I'm a lone voice. I would prefer not to spend 1.5 hours a month of our meeting time doing training. But more importantly, I'd be concerned about the 2 hours of training assigned by the DPA. As I think I expressed to you, for those of us at least that have other continuing education requirements, it is really helpful to kind of kill two birds with one stone. So I know that I'm currently doing training that the ABA puts on specifically in the police oversight area, but it also qualifies for MCLE credit. So I would, you know, want to be able to continue to do that. And so that would be my only concern about such a prescriptive approach. And so much of our meeting time being dedicated to
The
that.
only problem with that, and I hear what you're saying, but as far as the MCLE, because I have that requirement too, I don't know if it makes sense for individual board members to kind of have their own, you know, training. Like, I think it should be something that is standardized. Even though I hear you, you know, wanting to kill two birds with one stone, and I would want to sign up for the ABA, but I'm not currently a member, so I wouldn't be able to partake in that training. So that was my thought.
Yeah. A good thought, it's a good deal, I gotta tell you. Not to advertise the ABA, but there's a lot of training on there. I agree. I'm just thinking about my own work experience. We do have mandatory onboarding for our board. It's about 15 hours and it is all online. So I do think that there should be some component that is consistent and mandatory. I don't know that it needs to be this, like the entire 40 hours is a lot to me, but I don't know that it needs to be the entire thing.
So it's in the charter. That was what the DPA and the police department wanted us to do, to be able to do this work.
Right, no, I'm just commenting on the need for us to be in lockstep on what all 40 hours is.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I want to make a few points here. One, well, I had asked a few questions. Director, we do have, and I know myself, and I'm guessing a few other board members have made their allotted times. Yes, they've done their training.
The original board members, I believe, have reached or are close to reaching, from my review, but we need to look at that more closely.
Okay. And have we all done our ride-alongs? I'm just asking everyone.
Yes.
Okay. So, remember that which?
I've tried several
Okay.
times.
So I need to get it in. We gotta
No, I
get this
know,
done.
I know.
And then. Director,
It's not
is
just
there-
one though, right? We can do more than one ride along, as I understand.
Yeah, have fun. Yeah, that'd be a week. And then director is, I know the concerns and I hear from everyone that we want to make sure that everyone's educated up and ready to do the work. Is council's concern about the lack of education so far or the time that it has taken?
based on the inquiry from the presentation, it seemed that, there was just a concern about readiness as specifically as it related, if I follow the logic, as it related to hearings. So they were just concerned if you are having hearings and you haven't hit the 40 hours, then what does that mean for?
Okay, so I'm gonna make sure that while our newer members are still getting their hours, I'm gonna rely on our members with 40+ hours to do the hearings. And that way we're in compliance, we're not, we have nothing to complain about because we're gonna get this taken care of. So,
I don't think
I'm
we
sorry,
do.
board member Lefwich and board member Calvino, but I'm looking at you guys.
I don't think, I mean, it would be very helpful if you could send something out with everyone's hours, because I don't think I've met 40 hours personally. I mean,
Well, and I may not have either, but I did a long time ago, 2 years ago maybe, sent a list of readings that were authorized to, and that actually is a lot of hours there if people would do those readings. But I also wanted to ask the newest board members, the newer board members, Cayetano just mentioned that he felt like he was walking into a maze. But I'm just wondering what sort of training could be useful to prepare you for the kind of work we do, because I'm not sure. I mean, you have a law degree and you have a lot of training already, but what is it that could have helped you train for our particular?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what Board Member Wilson was talking about also applies to me because I just finished taking many classes and courses on, constitutional law, criminal procedures, criminal law, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the training that would have been particular to me and that would have helped me was mainly on the first point in the memo, which was the quasi judicial duties and obligations of the board. And I don't think that takes 40 hours to learn, but I do think that all the other knowledge that I brought, fulfilled the duties of learning about constitutional rights and civil liberties, et cetera, and due process. So it was mainly about board practices and procedures and the city practices and procedures than substantive law.
Yeah, I think, having something that outlined for us what our responsibilities are, what are the mandated responsibilities, what's discretionary. I mean, I think that would be so valuable.
I guess the problem is that doesn't reach 40 hours and that's sort of mandated by the charter. And so if we were to reach 40 hours, we have to fill it with something else.
No, but at least that.
Yeah,
as a portion of what would be, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking of some aspect of it is prescribed and mandatory for everybody.
Right.
And some aspect is discretionary, you can choose. So I'm thinking that mandatory component, it would be great if it included.
the only problem is that the charter does require that, I don't have the language in front of me, that either the department or
Right.
the union, be consulted and I don't know if we need their permission, but I don't think under the charter, we can do our own thing and I can say, because I went to law school and took crim pro, that covers, all of my hours or something. So there's that. We need to, maybe you can speak to what exactly the charter says.
Yeah, so we're looking at section 12A. It says the director of police accountability shall develop training provided to the board members, the chief of police, and a representative from the Berkeley Police Association shall have input on training provided to the board members and shall have the opportunity to attend all training provided. So one of the things during my tenure that I've done is I provided, when there's specific training that we're gonna have, I provided the chief and the association president with notice of it and opened it up for any input. I don't know that it requires approval per se, so that is not my understanding. But one of the other things about the 40 hours that I think is tricky, I think this contemplates everybody coming in at the same time, and that's certainly a easier way for onboarding people, because right now everybody's at different places. And to the point about individualized training and independent studies, if we're not, don't have the baseline training, then that's where it gets a little bit tricky. But when I was onboarded in Fairfax, we were all new board or panel members or board members. We actually set aside 3 weekends in a row. We all did we decided which dates worked for all of us, and that's how we got our initial 40 hours. In the 40 hours, it's somewhere that, and our investigator, NACO board member can speak to it, but 40 hours seems to be that kind of sweet spot that is showing up in a lot of oversight agencies, language. So that's, I think across the board, I've seen 40 hours.
And I just also want to say NACO is a great way to not only get an understanding for the work we do and to see the bigger picture, and meet other people who are in the same, very niche field, but you get your hours. So, you know, we spend a lot of hours learning and in these, very enlightening seminars.
Hearing the concern of other board members, I think maybe this suggestion and request might need a little bit more fleshing out. Maybe you can provide us with sample webinar seminars from NACO that you would lay out for onboarding board members, and you can actually say this would take 2 hours, and we can actually have a more fuller discussion of what is required and what wouldn't be required, and then we can segregate the 4 to 6 hours for ride along and eliminate that from this the trainings that would happen during the meetings that you propose, if that makes sense.
And building on that, I also really like the idea that it feels like there's a subset of the 40 hours that is needed for everybody. Like everybody needs some piece called 5 hours or whatever of the first bullet point of the judicial duties and obligations of the board. But then other pieces, it's almost like there are other modules that are a little more customizable, or, there's things on the shelf, but I might need a different set of things than Leah does because Leah's already got all this, legal experience that I don't have. And so it feels like maybe so it's thinking about the training package. It feels like thinking about how to break it down in those components, like what's the component that everybody needs? And then what are the other optional pieces around it? Like where's the ride along, participation in NACO, other webinars or whatever, but it feels like, and then, everything doesn't have to be custom built exclusively for each board member, but you could have stuff off the shelf to get to the 40 hours and just assemble a different group for different board members, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'd be interested in seeing it that way, because I think that would be a better way of getting to the end point.
And part of that fixed set could be training, like accompanying the same training that the department does. And I know that there's been different suggestions for participating in ABLE training, for example, and having board members attend that. That would knock out a lot of and that needs to be institutionalized more, I think, but it's an option.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, and please let me know if I'm not feeling the consensus of the board, but we'd like to take a little bit more time and reflect on this to see how this can work for everybody. But we still know we have to systematize our hours here. We have to get this done as a
I
board.
think we're asking maybe the director to come back with a recommendation that would parse out the 40 hours into one component that would be mandatory, that would be applicable for all board members,
Right.
and would be effectuated through assigned training or trainings at the board meetings. And then some component would be the ride along. Some component potentially could be participation in conferences, and then there'd be independent study, some hours that are on your own to come up with how you're gonna fill them.
So go ahead.
I was pointing out that board member Moses. So
Oh yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think the thought that I had with Director Aguilar last week was not necessarily around doing 1.5-hour long trainings during the meetings, but rather taking more of a cohort-based learning approach. Again, I think that the outline that you just laid out, Board Member Wilson, makes a ton of sense to me, and I think that understanding what's required versus optional, what's going to be a push versus what's going to be a pull from us of being able to pick and choose. Again, you look at that list, and somebody that's taken constitutional law is not going to need the same kind of material that I am around constitutional rights and civil liberties. But I do think that there is a value for us as a group to have some shared conversations around things that are not necessarily the core mandatory material. And the proposal that I made was this sort of I think of it almost like a book club, right? A recommended reading that we're doing independently, and we maybe have 10 minutes at a board meeting to say, this is, if anybody reviewed this material, this is anybody have thoughts or comments, and we can have time for that discussion rather than doing the training itself during the meeting, being able to do the conversation during that meeting.
Thank you for that, Board Member Moses. And right now, give me 1 second, Board Member Language. Director, do you still have the reading list from Board Member Calavita?
I do it, and the last time we circulated it was in February. We can recirculate that.
Can we recirculate that one more time? And it is a good list. Board Member Language?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Lieutenant Montgomery if there are any video that the department uses for training that might be appropriate for us as board members to view.
Yes, there are.
Because I think that would be very useful for us to see what you guys are saying, and you obviously could pick and choose which ones you think are most appropriate.
In some instances, when we put on a training, we record them for the replay later for new officers. So we do have a growing library. There are also a lot of videos on offer from post.
Yeah, I think that would be,
That's a great.
personally,
idea.
would be great.
Yeah.
And I know we did put together several trainings and invite the board, like for our use of force training. I think I think that conversation with the department and union probably ought to happen, because many of the things we're talking about, like, for example, can be sort of, depending on your perspective, like if you're asking for a training from the PAB about POBAR, you might get a different look or sense of the importance of POBAR than you would from a POBAR attorney who litigates specifically in POBAR and police-related Bill of Rights issues. So sometimes hearing the expert in the field versus, because like a lot of times people say, well, I don't understand why that's a right. We shouldn't have that. I don't recognize that. I don't agree with it. But then it's like, oh, well, here's why it's a right. Here's the case law behind it and that expertise in litigation. We get the right kind of
Or maybe we can
balances.
have both,
Yeah, I think that's what exactly it is, that the training ought to have balance.
Right.
Whether it's, getting someone to NACO, this is what, police officer Bill of Rights and union representatives are gonna say, and then getting the other aspect from somebody who litigates at Berkeley all the time, POBAR issues.
Right. So I would just ask that the director could check with the department to get perhaps a list of things, and that would be independent study if it's videos, that's approved by the association and by the department. I would think that'd be very helpful.
Board Member Calavita?
Yeah, I second that. I think it's a great idea. I personally, as a board member, feel like I would love to know what the department is learning, or what officers are learning as officers, as opposed to having training created just for a board member. And also, this might be controversial, but I think that it might be worth subsidizing individual board members' training. And I will be the first to admit that I haven't met any of my hours, I've met maybe 10 or 12. But I think that, it's in the spirit of accountability that it might be worth, and progress, that it might be worth putting that out there.
Shaming?
Yeah. A little shame.
Me, but I think it would be effective.
Director?
In the spirit of accountability, I have your hours as 5. And that's from February's count, February, so you might have increased. But I do appreciate that. I did suggest that to the body with different membership. But there is a model, some oversight bodies do that. Indianapolis, I'm thinking immediately they publish their training hours.
And, but then
Also Chicago, right?
On the metrics, because I totally agree with you.
Yeah, by the next meeting, that number will be at 15, because at the next meeting, you're gonna announce how many hours I have, and y'all will see.
I'll go through that. Lieutenant, is this thing working? Has the department started the ABLE training? Has the department started, because there was talk about us being able to come in and do that with you, or what?
We have, so
Observe?
the first phase was that we sent, train the trainer, people to get the training to put on the training. And I believe they've done, one or two groups of the first rounds of ABLE at the department, so the sort of ground level officers with staff.
How should we go? I mean, I for one would love to be able to observe, and I think the chief at one point said that that would be something that we could do, and in the context of this training discussion, you know, that would be useful, I think.
I'll inquire for you. I imagine something could be arranged.
Thanks.
It might not be, sort of with, depending on the groups, it might not be, what do you call it? Like, you know, some of these trains are like Las Vegas, right? It's like, you want to kind of hear it and absorb it.
Let's go.
What do you?
So
I don't know what you mean.
Well, a lot of these trainings are like,
Almost intimate.
yeah, you want them to be very open, and you want people to be able to free fire and experience the
Be very
sort of
candid.
depth of the thing without saying who's in the room,
Oh.
kind of thing. But by all means, you know, the offer's out there to put on the training for.
I think a bunch of
You
us.
mean what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's all you needed to say.
Yeah, just want when officers experience a training like that, you want them to be very open and test each other, and that's a intimate training.
We'll kill them vibe, which is understandable.
That's the case with the ABLE training as well.
Yeah, that training is all about officers testing one another and basically challenging one another, developing that muscle in policing, about becoming basically a department who is sort of comfortable, or has tools for being confrontational about seeing.
Well, that's why it would be really interesting for us to be able to see. Anyway,
Yeah, well, let me write by, I'm throwing out what's
Yeah,
going on in my
yeah.
head right now.
good.
Let me write by the chief, and I'm sure if it's on offer.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Sincerely. So it sounds like we're at a good space here, and we know where we need to go. And with that, I'm gonna take us to new business C. Discussion and recommendation on new PA proposal to the PAB for delegating the investigation or research of AI assisted police reports to the ODPA. Director.
Sure. This particular, item, we're trying to bring it proactively. I've not spoken with department reps, so I don't know if this is something being considered. I know that from my vantage point, during my time here, we have seen, and we indicated about a third of our cases in the last year or so, we have seen at least one allegation related to reporting, so something that's noticeable to us. The idea here is, and we hear it time after time in the reporting, there's constrained resources. How do we maximize it? This seems like a very unique, or not unique, but a very important opportunity here to get on the front of this issue, see if this is a tool that we can utilize for our departments and standardize and have consistency. Obviously, in the academy, you taught how to write reports. During field training, they provide you more training on ensuring there's different levels of review, but there's still, from my vantage point, different qualities and different outputs that we're seeing in terms of report. And some of these reports, there can be very consequential. We're talking about people being arrested off of them, restraining orders being approved because of the testimony provided by the officer. And we have seen in instances there have been errors or omissions of critical facts. And this tool would really, and I don't know if you had the opportunity to review the body worn camera tool that Axon has. It essentially, utilizing the transcript from the body worn camera, it immediately provides a templated report, and the officers could then input specific facts. There are other AI-assisted report writing tools out there as well. So we're not necessarily suggesting one or the other. We're saying, let's look at this issue. And it's also obviously gonna have some important implications when it comes for legal review and, you know, who wrote this? Did the AI write this, or did you at the officer? What levels of review were there? So I think it would be a worthwhile effort for our office, considering that it's something that's being communicated by community members to us in the complaint process.
So just to clarify, oh, sorry.
I'll start and then Alex. Lieutenant, I was curious, as to kind of within the department now, how much are you guys thinking about this, or what's the kind of latest kind of posture on this kind of tool?
So I think the product that you mentioned in your report, the Axon product, they sort of unveiled it at their last annual conference. And it was kind of interesting, intriguing. They, I think, just officially launched it. Maybe they soft launched it with several agencies already. And we were invited to like a webinar about this new tool. They're trying to sell it. So we're kind of monitoring it, I think would be a way to put it. We haven't entered into any quest to acquire that. Their video that we own right now, evidence.com, does do a attempted transcription of like all the things that are said on the or heard by the body worn cameras. And its accuracy is maybe 80% accurate. It catches it right, sort of like this AI attempting to record this. It has a hard time with low voices and different accents and things like that. So we're at the stage where we're monitoring it. Sounds like it has potential to be developed. We found also that they will, in the software space, people will sell it before it's ready. And,
Board Member Moses, I see you smirking there.
Yeah, I had a very much similar question about where the department was. And I'd also just share anecdotally, the last 2 times that I've gone to a doctor's office, they've used a similar technology to record the appointment in order to make notes for the doctor visit, including today, in fact. And so I imagine, given that fact, that some of the privacy concerns are likely being overcome already if they're happening in doctor's offices.
I guess, Board Member Calvino, and then Board Member Leftwich.
I feel like our staff is already stretched, and I don't see how this is a function that we should necessarily undertake. I mean, I know you're proposing it, so you must be ready to launch something like that, but it seems like something for the department, if they're interested, to pursue, and then we could, perhaps collaborate in some way, but this seems like an additional burden that is sort of not exactly in our wheelhouse. And I feel like we have to prioritize the things that have to get out the door now rather than take on new stuff.
Board Member Leftwich.
Well, I agree with what Board Member Calavita just said, but what I was gonna say is that I'm really concerned about accuracy. And to hear 80% accuracy, that's not, I mean, it's relatively high, but I think when you're talking about something as significant as this, 80% isn't high enough. And just anecdotally and not non-anecdotally in the legal field, you have lawyers who are counting on AI description of cases and submitting them to the court without reading the cases, and they're just wrong. So, you have these scope of policy, research, legal concerns, data price. I would say accuracy should be like the first one above cost. How accurate is this? So.
Can we get a review of the technology? The video here, or? Well, I'm just saying, would they be willing to do it for the BPA, for us to sit down if this is something we want to pursue?
Yeah.
Maybe we have the stakeholders sit down and hear.
I'm pretty sure, and again, it sounds like we're getting into the weeds of what the review would look like. We're just saying, from our vantage point, we're seeing a lot of community members express concerns about the accuracy right now from officers that are out on the field, and it is having consequential ramifications for these community members. It isn't a low a statistic, so it wasn't something that we could just kind of be like, okay. And if it's a tool, again, that can maximize efficiency of the officers, we believe that it was a worthwhile pursuit. And again, it's not necessarily to recommend approval for it or not. It is, if they were to go down this road and implement it, what kind of safeguards are gonna be in place, rather, be proactive rather than reactive.
So I guess I have a similar reaction to Kitty, but also I'm wondering, do you need us to? I mean, you have the authority to research and investigate any kind of issue that you want to, don't you? Like, because I guess I'd be reluctant to direct you to do this because, as you mentioned in your remarks earlier, like, I'm really curious to see this outstanding list of policy reviews that we need to do. We have the use of force policy, like, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. So I'd be reluctant to direct you to do it, but I don't feel like that means you can't do it. I mean, so do you feel like you couldn't do this if we didn't direct you to do it, or you feel like it gives you some authority or I don't know, some cover that you would need to do it, even though we're in an open meeting, I'm asking that question, but I just kind of want to understand.
I think I'm trying to respect the spirit of the charter, and there's very clear lanes that we each have in our respective bodies. Policy review is only authorized by us through you, through the board. And also I can see it potentially reaching a point of resistance if it's not duly authorized. So if I try to convene with the police department and it's not part of a PAB review, they're gonna say, well, what authority are you even looking into this? So I think that for me, in my review of the charter, it's the policy, it's your arena and you can delegate tasks to us.
I am,
I have one other thing I wanted to say. A question as to whether or not the city writ large has promulgated policies on the use of AI for city staff. And then two, are you looking at this for your own staff? Because I think maybe I have a slightly different take on it than you do, Julie. Just, I think there's a lot of promise and opportunity in AI in the legal field. But also, it's sort of related, I'm thinking about these investigations. You know, you can upload 1,000-page transcript report and actually get very accurate now summaries of key points. And so I think, like, in addition to looking at how BPD might be able to use it, I think we could start with looking in our own house at how we might be able to use it to increase our efficiency. So
I can report, sorry.
no, please, go
I
ahead.
can report that we have definitely piloted with AI technologies that have been here in different capacities, and it has maximized our efficiencies, particularly with our constrained staffing resources. So we're probably looking at a different office had we not implemented some of this AI technology.
I try not to make motions here as the chair. I try to let the board kind of, bounce off the ropes a little bit, but I trust your judgment, Director. If you feel like this is something that you'd like to pursue in the policy realm, I am going to make a motion right now to recommend that we're delegating the investigational research of AI assisted police reports to the ODPA. I would love a second.
One clarifying question, can we also give you, would it be useful, because I hear the sensitivities to also, we might have some super pressing urgent deliverables that have to come first. Is it also useful to give you some sense of priority? Because that would be my only suggestion.
I totally hear that, but the deliverables that we keep talking about, that in my experience, are 6 to 8 months down the road. So I don't know what we're talking about. It's like hot off the presses right now. We've done the heavy lifting. In my experience. I don't know. You guys tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's fair. My only suggestion was, I don't see that, like, I absolutely, I think this is great work. I think we should do the work. My only point was to say, we're not saying this is like, 5-alarm fire urgent, we need it, like, that's all I'm saying. Put it in your priority queue relative to the other things we have. That's my only the sense, but I support what you're saying.
I don't know if it's helpful, but Axon, for example, and they're not the only people in this space, but Axon, who we already contract with, is trying to get into the RMS space, the records management system space and the CAD space. They're basically trying to grow from taser, cameras, AI, to all those other systems, and they are looking for customers to become like whole suite purchasers. And I can tell you, at this point, that is a massive technological transition for us to move away from our existing provider for our CAD and RMS. So I think a major hurdle would be whether or not it integrates, whether their product integrates into our current CAD RMS provider, which is Tyler Systems. And I think it's being billed as a whole system replacement, and that's a multi-million-dollar contract for a CAD RMS system. So it's not even if the board were to say, we ought to do this, recommend doing this, and the department agrees and decides to do this, that's a many-year project. It's not a light lift.
Excellent. I second the motion.
Okay, so on the motion, to recommend, on the motion to delegate the investigation and research of AI-assisted police reports to the ODPA, I'll now proceed with roll call vote, if that was correct wording for it. Okay, Board Member Blackaby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Abstain.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Lethwich,
Yes.
Board Member Moses.
Yes.
Vice
That was a
Chair
yes.
Walton?
Abstain.
And Chair Moore. Yes. The motion carries 5 yes, 2 abstentions.
Great, that takes us to 9D, discussion and action on presenting the PAB report. 2024 Police Accountability Board report, fair and impartial policing implementation to the city council. Board Member Calavita, you have the floor.
Well, I just want to launch a discussion. The report was presented, sent over to the council. And, I just wanted to discuss whether people think that it's something that we should ask for a special presentation on. It also occurred to me that maybe because the downtown task force report is coming soon, and maybe we could present both of them to council at the same time. I think they deserve a little bit more public notice than what would be achieved otherwise, without such a presentation. That's
Any
just
thoughts?
open for discussion.
Opening the floor up.
Do you have a sense of when the downtown task force report will be out? And if it would be feasible to have a special meeting with them together?
I think it would be feasible. I don't know whether it's desirable. That's for us to discuss, but.
What still needs to be done on the downtown task force? Because I know you've been talking about this for months. It sounded like it's pretty close.
Well, there are just a few places where I've asked staff to make sure that this statement is correct. We need this particular figure, 4 or 5 places like that.
I think it's hard for me to know, to discuss integrating them without knowing what the top line takeaway is from the downtown. Because if there's like a really standout takeaway from the report that needs to be highlighted, then I wouldn't want to integrate the two into a single special meeting, to focus on just what the findings and takeaways were from the downtown report. I didn't think that there was anything standout-ish from fair and impartial policing other than just like the general gist of our relationship.
Okay.
I'd also, I guess, just suggest from, I'm not a communications strategy expert, although I've spent some time thinking about it. I mean, there could also be value to having a drumbeat of one and spend a few weeks really pushing one and then the next, just to be, I think it would help with the visibility of the work and to give each the requisite attention that they might each deserve. I'm also thinking potentially about, outreach to some of our friends in the press and, helping to give them some information that they could potentially do some writing about, and it might be easier to keep those separate. Again, that's just thinking, not knowing exactly what each report is, but there could be some value to going a few weeks on one thing and then shifting and going in terms of a communication strategy.
I agree. I would keep them separate.
Okay. And we may want to just, I mean, maybe we want to focus on the downtown task force report and not so much the very impartial. I don't know. I mean, I don't feel terribly strongly.
You mean in terms of like trying to get the media coverage or
Yeah.
in terms of a council presentation?
In terms of doing a sort of separate presentation to council. And they now have the FIP report and, I don't know if you've spoken, Director, if you've spoken to the mayor about his preference for whether that would be presented in a meeting or anything like that.
I'm sorry, the downtown task force or the?
No, they're very impartial.
Last time I spoke with his team, we were trying to see if we can do the 2-for-1 in the annual report. So I think that there might be interest for, especially, I don't want to speak for them, but, I meet with a representative from his team on Friday, so I can float that around, what would be their preference.
Okay.
But there was initial, I guess, interest of doing it in a special meeting, so.
It feels like, and maybe, you know, and we talked about this a little earlier, but maybe we should have a subcommittee meeting on this outreach and just think about all the elements. We've got Juneteenth, we've got Juneteenth, we've got these various reports, and just think about all of the different pieces here and how maybe we want to put them together. And
Do we have an outreach?
we have an outreach committee that Chip and I are on, so
Oh,
they
good.
came out of the board retreat.
Okay, you decide.
No, you want, you're the subject matter. So we're just the hacks. We need the subject matter expert to come in. No, but but I think it could be useful. Then we can think about how to put all this stuff together with the director.
Yeah.
So we've got some of the staff resources. We know what's coming out in terms of content. We can think about the timeline.
Yeah.
And just work it out. Because again, we can't decide it now, but I think if we hash it out, I think we could really dig into it. And
Yeah.
then maybe come back to something to the board.
And we just talked about the community meetings, right? So
Exactly,
that we
yeah,
could,
yeah.
have something orchestrated around those meetings. Do we have any kind of social media? Is there an Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn for the, for ODCA?
Snapchat.
No, and that is part of the,
TikTok?
What's that?
the strategic plan that's attached with the new funded, communications. plan.
Okay. So if we don't have that, do you have the ability to upload things onto our website yourself, or it has to go through IT?
So we have the ability, but there are limitations to it, and it's something that's been on our radar to try to see if we can transition. There are other, independent departments within the city that have a standalone website. They have a landing page within the city, but then one that's less structured and more specific to the work that they're doing. So it's something that's been on our list, and we would like to explore that. Right now, we're limited in what we can do, but certainly reports we can upload.
Okay, because do we typically upload, like our annual report, is that uploaded or fair? Like, could we at least upload our recent report?
Yeah, can you provide staff something, Ms. Moody?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of uploading those reports now.
Okay, great.
There's usually just a slight delay, but yes, if you go to the Police Accountability Board landing page, there's a tab called Reports. Just addressing the point about like when we schedule, could we upload to the city website? The process is very similar to how we upload our public meetings, with the slight difference in that we could have it appear in like the landing page where I forget the exact title, but something like what's happening, or like your city, there's a calendar invites to pop up. We have the capability to do that. There's just usually a bit of a time delay for it to get posted. But as soon as we know, that's something we definitely notice.
Okay, so that takes us, at least to, agenda item number 10, which is public comment. So Jose, I'm gonna see if we have, anyone who'd like to speak.
Okay, again, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but maybe a lot less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, again, except confidential personnel matters. At this time, I'll start with our physical speaker, or those physically present, if they'd like to provide any public comment. Okay, just one moment while I get the timer up on the screen as soon as I find it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate the work that you do. The training that you need to take is a lot. I know it's very time consuming. I appreciate all that you're doing. A few comments on various things. One is that on the AI, the accuracy percentage may sound high, but in terms of figuring out which parts of it aren't accurate, it actually could be really not so good. I remember, back in the old days when there was this, new invention, something that could scan, not handwriting, but something that was printed and make it electronic. And it was like, oh, it has 95% accuracy. And it's like, well, that's great, but it means it gets 1 out of every 100 letters wrong. And in a page, that means there's at least, 8 errors on each page. That's really not so great after all. So I think AI has a long way to go in terms of that. But I applaud your being open to looking into this stuff because it's coming whether one likes it or not. So I think it's important to pay attention to that. The other thing I wanted to comment on briefly was I appreciated the question to the chief about the traffic stop, the planned traffic stop. And I sent an email just before the meeting, you may not have seen it, that I think that the neighborhoods that are chosen, although they're chosen for reasons of proximity to roads or proximities to where there are accidents, of course, the same neighborhoods in which there tend to be accidents are also the same neighborhoods in which a higher number of African-American citizens live. And I remember an incident that I saw years ago back when the police were putting onto Nextdoor little items about how they stopped someone and found weapons in the car, and then therefore made an arrest, and we're talking about individual arrests. And the story that was given, I followed up to see if I could find out a little more by looking at the arrest records at that point, which were available online. There were the traffic stops were being done along Ashby Avenue, but this particular stop wasn't actually done right on Ashby Avenue, but sort of 1 block over. A father who was dropping off his child at Malcolm X school didn't stop for a stop sign. It didn't say that he blew right through it or he just didn't come to a complete stop. And the officer asked for permission to search the car. The car was searched. A weapon was found. He was arrested. And then when I looked more into it, the part that didn't get publicized at first was that the weapon was, I think, a handgun. It was in a box in the trunk, locked and not loaded. So, it just seemed like this man's life had been really, really wrenched of being arrested like in front of his child at school. I don't really know how much that served in terms of crime prevention. And I think that choice of neighborhood had a consequence that may not have been the consequence that was intended. So thank you very much. One more thing, actually, I'm curious about the extra funding that goes into this. Does this mean that the officers are being paid overtime? Is that why the extra funding is needed for doing something like that traffic stop? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other physically present speakers, I will now move on to virtual public comment. Chair, at this time, we have no hands raised or attendees in the webinar.
So that takes us to agenda item number 11, which is closed session. Yeah, final break, everybody.
Board Member Moses, I did send you a closed session link. Okay, perfect. So we'll be switching over. All right, Chair, we're back.
We are back from closed session. There is nothing to report to the public. And now I'm going to go to our last agenda item of the evening. Can I have a motion
Motion to adjourn.
and a second?
Second.
Thank you all for your energy, effort, and enthusiasm. Have a great evening. Good night.
Mike, Kyle.
Feel better.